as a developer, sooner or later, you're gonna have to implement file or image uploads into your app. For example, let's say we're building some kind of app where a person can upload a photo and we turn it into a cool Polaroid. So we're gonna need some solution to let users upload files or images. And I'm gonna use the Filestack widget here because it makes it very easy for us. So Filestack is the sponsor of this video, and you've probably already seen this widget somewhere. It's quite a popular widget. I can select a file, for example, some photo, and I can upload it here. I get a preview and I can change this, or I can crop this. I can say, maybe focus on this a little bit more. And I have other options here. I can then press save and it will actually upload this very fast. And then we can display the image here, and then we can immediately transform it with Filestack as well. And you can see we eventually get this very cool Polaroid effect on the photo that we uploaded. Now, technically, you could do file and image upload yourself, but you're going to run into many obstacles. For example, you need to build a modern UI for file uploads, right? So this is a nice widget. It's responsive and it looks nice. It has great design. Then you need to make uploads fast and reliable, including on mobile devices. You want to show previews of the files or images, and you want to allow users to edit them perhaps before they're uploaded. You want to integrate with other services. So here with Filestack, I can pick Google Drive or other sources where my images could be. It could be Dropbox, could be some other integration that you need to implement. And then you also need a backend for transforming files, right? So here we were transforming the image into a Polaroid, but maybe you want to resize images or do some other transformation. You're also going to need a backend to store them in a database. Then you need a CDN, so the images are very fast for downloading. And all of this needs to be scalable. So if you get a lot of traffic, your setup doesn't crash. And then of course, everything also needs to be secure. You don't want to give people the opportunity to upload malicious files. And you also maybe want to restrict who can access the files, right? So you want to use signed URLs. So technically you could do this yourself, but if we want to do it professionally, you may want to use a solution like Filestack, and they are the sponsor of this video, and that's what we're going to look at in this video. So Filestack makes it very easy to upload and then transform and then also deliver. They put it on a CDN, right? So Filestack takes care of those obstacles. So with Filestack, we get this nice widget. The uploads are fast. We don't have to maintain a full backend server. Filestack will notify us with a webhook when an image is uploaded, and we can have a serverless function that can then process that webhook. And we can also use a serverless function to use signed URLs here. So that's what we're going to take a look at in this tutorial. So let's start from a clean slate. I have a simple page here. So we have an H1 here, turn your photos into Polaroids, and then just a paragraph below there. Then we have this button here on the page, doesn't do anything, just some styling. And then we have this section here with uploaded image, which is currently just an empty div here besides the heading. And then we also have the other side for the transformed image. So just a bunch of text essentially right now and a button on the page. Now what we want here is that when we click on the button, we actually get that Filestack widget. So I'm going to install the Filestack library here. So I will say npm install Filestack React. That package will give us the React components, but the core logic is in Filestack-JS. So I will also install that. And let's also install types for TypeScript here. We can do add types and then it's Filestack React. So I'm going to install all of that. All right, so I installed those packages, and that widget is called a picker overlay. We can import that from Filestack React, and then we can use some state here to determine whether it should be open or not. So let me import use state here. Now I'm using Next.js here, and by default, these are all server components, but now we're using use state. So we do need to convert this into a client component. Typically, I don't recommend that you make the whole page a client component, but this is just a simple demo, right? So initially the picker should not be visible, so it's false. And then when we click the button, we want to set that to true, right? So on click, set the show picker to true. So then when it is true, we can render that on the page, right? So then here we can have some logic. When the show picker is true, so show picker, we can then use conditional rendering here. And I get a suggestion from Copilot. I will accept that. We will not use the on success handler, but we will use on close. So when the widget gets closed, we do want to reset the state back to false again. And we also want to use an API key, because when we upload the image, it's going to be saved to our account. So let's go to the Filestack website. I already created an account, so I'm just going to get my API key from there. All right, so in the Filestack dashboard, Discord, you can get the API key right here. I can just copy that. This will be a public API key, so it will be exposed on the front end. So let's go back here, and I have created a separate file here called .env.local, and then we can say next public Filestack API key, and then I can paste that right here. Right, so if you add next_public_ to your key name, Next.js will expose this on the front end. Right, so be careful with this, but in this case we do need that for that widget here. So I'm gonna save here, and then here for the API key we can use process.env. And don't forget, it needs to be next public_. All right, now I get a red squiggly line here for API key because API key needs to be a string, and technically this environment variable could also be undefined. So if I hover this, the type here is string or undefined. So in practice, you may want to do some validation with Zod, but here I will just assert or cast this as a string. So I will say as string. And actually, let's also get rid of the on close, because instead of having those individual props, what we're going to have is basically one big prop, picker options, in which we're going to configure basically all the options. So that will be an object. So we have two sets of curly braces, and here we can actually configure a lot of options, and the Filestack documentation is really good on this. We can determine what we want to accept here. And actually I get some nice suggestions here from Copilot. So let me just accept this here. So we can say we only want to allow images, so not PDF files, not anything else, only images, let's say. And you can specify this further, right? So you can say only PNG images or JPEG, right? But let's say we allow all images. You can also determine how many files they can upload in one go, right? So maybe we just want to restrict that to one file. We can also specify, for example, how big the file can be, and this is in bytes. So here we have, let's say 10 bytes times this is going to be like 10 kilobytes, and then we're going to have 10 megabytes, right? So here this would be 10 megabytes as a maximum size. We can also determine the image maximum dimensions, so 1000 by 1000 pixels, let's say. Now one really cool option is from sources, and this basically specifies where your users can get their images from. So we want to allow local file system, but maybe also Dropbox or even Instagram, Facebook, maybe also some public services like Unsplash. So you can specify all of that here, but we will stick with the default. And what we will also specify here is what we want to do when the widget gets closed. So then we do want to reset our state here. So we will do this. And actually, when I save here, it actually already opens this up for us. So let me try closing this. Let me refresh here for a clean slate. So now let's see if we can open this image by just clicking the button. And actually we do. We get our widget here. Let me make this a little bit wider. Right, so now you can see we have added this very nice slick widget to our page. And we can add images from our own device or maybe some public URL. We can search on the internet from Facebook, Instagram, Google Drive. And so these are just the defaults. Now if we try uploading an image here right now, we can already see a preview. We can even edit it, right? So I want to do this, crop this. I can save here, and now I want to try to upload it, right? So if I click upload right now, that doesn't work yet. So here in the options, we can also determine what we want to do when the user actually uploads an image. We do that with the on upload done, and the Filestack will give us that result of whatever the user is uploading, and we can do something with that. Let's actually try logging and see what we get. All right, so I opened up the console and let's upload a file and see what we get. So I'm going to pick some random picture. I'll say this one. We can decide if we want to crop anything here. I will just leave it like it is, just upload. We can see it's uploading, and then we get some result here in the console. What we get is an object, and in the object we have two keys: files filled, well, nothing, and files uploaded. And that's an array with all the files that were uploaded, but here we only have one. And here is all the data that we're going to need. So every file on Filestack gets a so-called handle. So this is basically like the ID. And so if we want to show that image, we can take a look at this URL. So it has a base URL of cdn.filestackcontent.com, and then it's that handle. So this base URL will stay the same. We just need to keep track of this handle whenever there's an image that's being uploaded. And it gives other data as well, which source the user is picking. So here it was the local file system. All right, so what we want to do is we want to show the uploaded image here on the left side. So let's see, when the upload is done here, we get the result, and we need to grab the handle, and we can put that in state as well. So let's create a state variable for that. We can call that uploaded file handle, and that will just be an empty string initially. And then when it's successfully uploaded, we will set the handle to that state variable, right? So here we get the result, we use result, and then it's that object, right? So then we get files uploaded, which is an array. So we get the first one, and then we grab the handle, basically the ID of the file that was uploaded. And then we can also close the widget, right? So now when the user uploads an image, we will have that handle here in state. So then once we have that, we want to show that here. So then we can use that state variable here below uploaded image, and here we can output that image. We can have some conditional logic here. So if there is an uploaded file handle, then we can use the next image component actually, right? So Next.js provides us with an image component that has all sorts of optimizations out of the box. And here we can set the source to, it is that base URL. So you're going to have HTTPS and then CDN Filestack content. And then after the / we're going to have that handle. Now I get a warning here. Let's see, these image elements do need an alt prop. So we can say uploaded image. If we save here, and let me just refresh for a clean slate. So now what we can do, we can upload an image, and let me just pick the same one. I'm going to upload this image, just press upload. It's going to upload the image very quickly. And we get an issue here because when you use an external image source, you do need to provide the width and height attributes yourself here for the image component. So let me just make that something like 350. I will save here, and let me try that one more time. So I will upload this image. Let's see what happens. It's going to upload, and now it should go successfully. And we see the uploaded image here. We don't have to put this on our own server or host or store it in our own database. Filestack will store that for us, and it will give us the URL, the location of where we can access this image. It has already put it on their CDN, so it's going to be fast to download all around the world. And now, of course, we also want to transform this image, and that's also something that Filestack makes very easy. So we can go to transformed image here. We also want to show an image. So we can actually just copy the entire thing here, and let's just paste that here for transformed image. So to transform an image with Filestack, it's actually very easy. The only thing you have to do is change the URL, and you do that before the upload file handle. So after .com we'll have /. So in between those two slashes, we can specify the transformations that we want to apply to that image. So one of the things we can do is do auto_image. This will automatically transform the PNG file that we uploaded into a WebP or JPEG file, depending on the user's browser. It can very easily optimize that for us. Since we're going to be compressing, you may want to control the quality a little bit more yourself. And you can do that with another path parameter here. So you can say quality is, and then you have a value. And by default, it's going to be 75, but maybe we want to make it 95. And since here we want to make it a Polaroid, let's see how we can do that. So I'll add another path parameter here. We can change the sepia. We can say is a tone of 85. And then we can actually use a Polaroid filter that they also offer out of the box. So this is not going to be the uploaded image. This is going to be the transformed image. So the only thing we have to do is just change the URL a little bit, and Filestack will automatically transform this whole image. So let's save here. I'm going to refresh here, and actually this should already work. So I didn't even refresh, but now we are going to append this image to the DOM, and it's going to have this URL. So it will actually already make that request, and Filestack transforms it on the fly. So here you can see we now have a very cool Polaroid version of the image that we uploaded. So you can see we don't even need our own server to do that. We just have to change the URL, and Filestack will transform the image on the fly. Right, so now I could also upload some different image. Let's see, I have some Yellowstone PNG image. I can just upload this. I can change anything here if I want, but let's just upload this and let's see if that works. And it will change the uploaded image here, and then it will send this network request to the Filestack server, and you can see it automatically transforms it into this Polaroid version. So I think that's pretty cool. Now in reality, there are two other things you do want to pay attention to. So this is currently a public website. So anybody could go here, they could upload any file. All right, now currently this is a public website. All right, so anybody could come here, they could upload their files and then download files, transform files. Now that's a little bit dangerous because you're going to open up yourself for malicious users. They could upload many images and they can have a lot of transformations, basically take up a lot of bandwidth. So one thing we can already do here is just make sure that only, let's say, logged in users can do this. For this demo example here, we're not going to build a whole authentication system. Let's just imagine now that this is behind a login. Let me just quickly add that here. Let's say, assume this is now behind a login, right? So now you need to log in, user needs to create an account, and then they have access to everything here. And now one of the things that we probably want to do is when a user uploads a file, we don't want to store the whole image ourselves and we don't want to serve it on a CDN ourselves, that's what Filestack handles for us. But Filestack will also give us a webhook to notify us when somebody uploaded a file. And we can take that webhook. In that webhook, Filestack will let us know the handle of the image, right? So currently what we were doing here, this is all on the client side. Right? We were taking the handle and it's all client side here, but we want to persist that. We want to store it in a database so that if the user comes back later, we still have all of those handles, right? IDs of the image. We can show all the uploaded images. So now we actually do need some backend functionality. And the cool thing with Filestack is you don't have to create a whole new backend. You can just use serverless functions. Maybe you're already familiar with this. You can use something like AWS and Lambda. All of these cloud providers have these. Azure, Google Cloud, they all have serverless functions. So you don't have to spin up a whole server and manage the whole server. We just want to have one function running that can accept a webhook and then can just store the handle of the uploaded image into our database. We just want to have one little function, essentially, not the whole server. And that's what serverless functions are for. They make it very easy. Now I'm using the Next.js framework here. And the cool thing is that if you create an API route handler and you deploy it to a cloud provider like Vercel, they can actually already make that a serverless function, right? So we can do that here within the context of our application. So let's actually do that. So this can become a serverless function and we want to accept a webhook. So let me create a route for that, Filestack webhook. And in Next.js, you can call that route.ts. So the folder structure is important here because that's how you do routing in Next.js, also for serverless functions, also for the backend portion. So this is going to be /API/Filestack webhook, and that's where we're going to get a post request, right? So these webhooks are typically post requests. So if we go into the dashboard again, here under configuration, we can go to webhooks, and here's where we can tell Filestack where to send that webhook to, right? So somebody uploaded an image and we want to be notified of that on the back end. Now we are here working locally, right? It's during development. Filestack will actually send a webhook from their server, right? So Filestack will send a request from their server to us, but we are working locally here during development, right? So I'm here on my local computer, and everybody cannot just make a request to your local computer. Your computer is sort of safeguarded, right? Not everybody can just, start making requests. So we need to open up our computer so that servers from the internet can make a request to us. So there are some tools that allow you to do that. A popular one is called ngrok. So I will just open that up here. The only thing we want to do here is we want to make sure that whatever the address here is of our Next.js app, which is localhost 3000, that other servers on the internet can make a request to that address. So that's what we can do with ngrok. So ngrok is installed on my computer, and then you can say ngrok http, and then I can say localhost 3000. All right, so here this seems to be working, and it's showing us that ngrok will forward anything they receive to my localhost 3000. So this is the address that Filestack should send the webhook to, and then ngrok will forward that to our app here. ngrok is installed on my computer, that's why they can do it. Let me copy this, and now we can go here and we can tell Filestack send your webhooks to this address. Now this will send it to localhost 3000, but our webhook route is /API/Filestack-webhook, right? So we do need to attach this so that it's actually routed properly to our localhost app. All right, and when I do that, you can see Filestack has now added this to the overview here. So here you can see they will send us webhooks for all of these types. So also there's something called workflow and file export, and also all of these other ones. But of course, what we're interested in is file upload. So it will send it to this address. That's an ngrok address, and ngrok will then forward this to us here. So let's see if all of that actually works. Let me make this a little bit wider. Now this will be a post request. So we do want to export a function called post, and it will take in a request. And I get a good suggestion here. So let me copy this and let's type this as request. So we get a request, we're going to parse it as JSON, meaning we're going to convert it from JSON into a normal JavaScript object, and then we're just going to log it. And we will also send a response, okay. So this will just be an HTTP 200 status code response, which will let the sender of the webhook know that everything went all right. So I'm going to save here. We're going to go back to our app. Let's go to our app here. I'm going to refresh here for a clean slate. We're going to upload an image again, right? Now we're logged in. I'm going to going to upload an image, and I'm going to pick the same image, doesn't matter. I'm going to press upload here. This will upload the image to Filestack. They're going to send a request to our backend here to let us know that a user uploaded an image so that we can then store this perhaps in a database. I'm going to click upload here. It's going to upload the image, and let me see if that went all right. So we do see it here in the client. Now we are logging something here, so let's see if it actually works. So we may have to wait a little bit until the webhook arrives. And after a couple seconds, we do see something logged here. Right, so something arrived here and we parsed that and we are logging that body now. So when we scroll down here, we can see there were actually two events. So first, Filestack notified us of an upload, and you can see they give us information about that upload. So they give us the URL, so where we can find that image. And we can also see the type that was uploaded and other things, also the size in bytes. And also there was another event, the converse event. So some image was transformed. And that's because that's what we did here immediately on the front end, but just changing the URL. Right, so that's what we want. So we can use that body data to then process this further. We could do something like webhook received for body.action, and that's going to be upload or transformed. And actually, before we process it any further, what you usually want to do with webhooks is you want to make sure that the person who sent you the webhook is actually who they say they are. So you do want to verify perhaps the webhook signature, right? So this is actually quite important. Technically, anybody could send this webhook. So we want to make sure that this is actually coming from Filestack. So then we can log this. We could say saving body.text. Let's take the URL to database. Right, so that's an example of how you can process these webhooks with Filestack without managing a whole server. This can just be a serverless function that will just receive and process that webhook. Right, so that's how you can get notified of events. Let me close out of all of this. All right, so one other thing you want to pay attention to is some other security measures you can take. So one of the obvious things to do is to put everything behind in a login, right? That's what we already assume here, but you can restrict it even more. For example, before somebody can upload a file, maybe they need to get permission first. So we can use so-called signed URLs. And those signed URLs will allow the user to upload in the next 15 minutes, let's say. Right, so we can, for example, determine how long a user gets access to a particular feature. And Filestack actually has a great article on this on their website, securing access to your account and assets. In the default mode, you have limited controls against abuse. In the default mode, write access is effectively public. So basically everybody could technically just upload. So let's see what we can do to combat that a little bit better. So we can go to our dashboard here, we can go to security, and we can go to policy and signature. So here we want to turn on use security. And when we do that, it means every request needs to be signed. So when you want to upload or download an image, you need to get permission essentially first, right? With a so-called signed URL. So we're going to turn on security here, and you need to, okay, so now we have successfully turned on security, and here we actually get an app secret. So this actually needs to be secret. So this will only stay on the server side. And then below here, we can generate those permissions, or what's called a policy, and then a signature to verify that policy. So for example, I can determine when that permission should end. So maybe they only should get 15 minutes of access, let's say. And we can also determine what they should be able to do. Should they be able to upload or download? Download is read, upload is pick. Should they also be able to convert, right? So the transformation essentially. Should they be able to delete something? And there are other settings as well. For example, the maximum file size that they should be able to upload. Right, so you can use that widget here in the dashboard, but let's go back to our app here. So now what we want to do is before somebody can upload, we want to get a signed URL essentially. So let's create another serverless function here, and let's call that something like Filestack security, and that will just be a serverless function again. And here we can use the JavaScript library of Filestack, so we can import everything as Filestack from Filestack.js. And what we're going to do here is determine if and with what permissions the user should be able to upload, but also download images, right? So downloading means just basically viewing them here. You're downloading it from a remote server, right? And that costs something, right? That costs bandwidth, right? So there's value in adding some security around all of this. So what we're going to do here, we'll create a variable called security, and this will hold all of the security credentials essentially essentially that a user would need to do anything. Right, let's just call it all the credentials, and that's what we will return from this route. So we will say return a response in JSON with the data being, we'll actually implement this in a second, but you can see first, before we even open the picker, we want to make sure that we make a network request here to get permission. We will get it back, and then we will open the picker. So if we go back to our page here, let's see. So here on the front end, we need to keep track of if we already have the security credentials or not. And we can actually create a state variable for that. Let's just call that security, set security, and let's just make that null initially. So security is currently empty, and I save here. So let me just refresh here for a clean slate. So we now have no credentials. Initially, we have no credentials. We don't have any permissions. So we shouldn't be able to open the widget yet. So here when we say show picker, well, here we also want to check now if security is defined. Right? So now if I click here, it won't open because we haven't asked the server for permission essentially. We can use useEffect to immediately when this component mounts, ask for permission and get those security credentials. And that will look something like this. So here we have a function and we call that fetch sig and policy. So the actual security consists of a policy, which basically means what you are allowed to do, right? Upload or download or maybe delete, and then a signature that actually verifies. So you need both. And that's what we're going to fetch from our backend route here. Call it here so that we will immediately start fetching this as soon as this component mounts. So then here we want to return those credentials. So how can we do that? So first, before we even do anything, we may actually want to double check if the user is logged in. So we may want to check if user is logged in. If the user is not logged in, they should not get any credentials, any permissions, right? So here, if the user is not logged in, we can just return something else. If the user is logged in, we do want to give the user permissions, but they should still be limited, right? So maybe not delete requests and things like that. So here we can determine that. So we can say the policy here, what kind of calls should they be able to make? Well, here we get a suggestion, but we don't want all of this. We only want to allow the user to, let's say, pick and read. So pick is upload, read is downloading. And then let's also say they should also be able to convert so that we can actually transform the image to a Polaroid. We can also configure other things here. For example, the maximum file size that they should be able to upload. And let's say it should be 2 megabytes. So it's in bytes. So that's something like this. And then also very importantly, expiry. So how long should these credentials be valid? And typically this should be a short time. Could be a couple minutes, have short expiries generally. Now for expiry, it is easier to use this widget. So I will just pick a random date here. Let's say 1st of October, and I get an expiry here that I can use. Let's see, I will copy this expiry and I will just paste it here. So that's the policy. So the user will receive the policy here on the front end. So then when the user attempts to upload, they will show the backend, hey, I have this policy from you. They could just create that policy themselves. We also need a signature that can verify that policy. So that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to say const security is filestack.get security, and here is where we can pass in the policy, and then we actually need our filestack app secret. So this actually does need to become a server-side only environment variable. You can find that here in the dashboard as well, right? So here there's an app secret. So I'm gonna add this here to the env local file I have, right? So I have filestack. So here you do not want to add next public because then it could be visible on the front end. So I will add it here. All right, so I've added it to my env local file. We get red squiggly lines here from TypeScript because this could technically also be undefined if something goes wrong with loading the environment variables into our app. So typically you do want to validate your environment variables with a validator like Zod. I have a separate video on that. I also have a whole course on React and Next.js in which we also talk about that. But I will just cast this as a string only for now. So what we get here now from filestack in security here, we're going to get the policy, but also a signature that verifies that policy. And the user will need both to do anything now. So that's what we're going to send back to the front end, right? So now when we first mount this component, when we come to this page, we're going to make that network request. We're going to get something in the response here. So let's see. We're going to convert that from JSON to a normal JavaScript object, and we can immediately destructure that here. So we get back data, and the data, that's the security that we return here from the backend, right? So then here, data, Well, that consists of two things, the actual policy and also signature. And we can actually immediately destructure that here as well in JavaScript. So we will actually get policy and signature. And that's what we can set then as the state here. So we can say set security, and we can just set an object with policy and signature. Now we get an issue here with TypeScript because we have initialized this state with null. So this is not properly typed here for TypeScript. So here, what we can do here, we have these weird looking angled brackets to type this state variable. We can type this as a custom type. Let's call that security or null. So initially it's going to be null, so it could also be null, but here eventually we do set it to something, and that's going to be of type security. We haven't defined that type here yet, but we can do that here. So type security is just going to be an object with policy and signature, both of which will be strings. So that's a bit of work, but it's part of the game. If we save here now, and if we now go to this page, it should now send a network request, and this serverless function here will send back a response with all the security details that we need. And then we set that here. It should not be null anymore, right? So then here, when we go to the picker, now we have show picker and security. When we click here, should both be truthy. So now if I click here, you can see our widget opens again. And if we do anything that is not in line with this policy, for example, if we try to upload something that's too big in file size, or it has expired, right? So now it's been maybe a week later, I try to do something like this, it will give us an error. Or I try to do something like delete or something else that's not allowed in this list, I will get an error. So here, what we should not forget is when we have the security information, we also need to attach it here to the picker overlay, because this will make a request to Filestack server, and the Filestack server will check if you actually have the proper credentials. So here we can add client options, and then we can just add a security key, same name for key and values. On JavaScript, you can just leave off the value. So now if I save here, when I go to this page, it will fetch the signature and policy, and it will add that here to the use state. So then here with the picker overlay, we can now open it up. The security details have been added here. So now if I click upload file and I try to upload a photo, I open this up and I upload this, everything should still work, right? Because I have the proper credentials. And you can see we don't get an error, but we do get a different issue, which is now we want to display the image, and that's downloading. And now we have only implemented uploading. So if we want to download an image, meaning just view it on the page here, we have to go to this URL, and here we now also have to add those security credentials. And that's necessary because otherwise everybody could just take this URL and download this unlimited times. But now we're going to add our security details to this URL, and in the security details we have basically embedded some restrictions, right? So also expiry, for example. So we can only download this until October 1st is what we just did. And this is very important. Imagine you're building some kind of, streaming service like Netflix. Before you can download, before you can view a file, they want to make sure that you still have an active subscription, let's say, and the expiry will depend on the active subscription date, let's say, right? So these signed URLs are very important for certain applications. So here to add the security details to the URL, this is done with search params. So we'll have a question mark, and then we'll say the policy is going to be security.policy, right? We have this stored in state, and the signature will be security.signature. And we want to do the same for the transformed image. So now let's say I have a transformed image here, and at the end I will add search params. So this will make a network request to the Filestack server, and it's going to check if this policy and signature, if it allows you to do what you're trying to do, which is transforming here. Right, we're attempting to transform this file by adding this into the path parameters, but we don't want to allow everybody to do that. So we have some additional verification with signed URLs. And I did make a small typo here. So this should be a $sign in front of the variables here. So here in the template literal, make sure if you're following along that you have this correctly. So now I'm going to save here. And now we have restricted essentially who can upload and download and under what conditions. And I should of course also fix the typo here. So here also add a $sign in front for the transformed image. And I should also fix this for the transformed image here. So I'm going to save here. And actually the URL, when you do transformation, should be structured a little bit differently. So here the uploaded file handle should actually come at the end of of the URL. So I will just add a / and then the uploaded file handle. So then the policy and signature come after these filters. And here it's not search params. They should just be part of a path parameter. And it's called security. And then we say equal signs. Policy should be colon. And then here, instead of an ampersand, it should be a comma. Not an equal sign, but a colon again. Right, so make sure you check out the documentation to get this right. I'm going to refresh here. So now when we refresh, we're going to get the credentials from the server. The server is going to give us some permissions, right? Pick, read, and convert. So we should be able to upload, to download it, and then also convert it. And let's see if that's actually working now. So it seems to work. So I'm going to upload an image and I'm going to upload here. That looks good. So now let's see. All right. So it could take a couple of seconds. And here we see an uploaded image. So at least we can upload now and also download. And now let's see if the transformation still works, because the URL was a little bit tricky. And you can see after some seconds, we see our transformed image now. Pretty cool. Right, so this was an example of how to do signed URLs when you're uploading files. And we didn't even create our own backend application, right? We were just using these route handlers in Next.js, which are basically the same as serverless functions that you would see on, for example, AWS, right? So just some simple functions. We don't have to manage a whole server. So check out Filestack. They make it very easy to create a very scalable serverless application with file and image uploads. I hope you learned something. My React and Next.js course is coming out soon, so make sure you check out the links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.